What's the most disturbing thing you've heard someone say when they thought no one was listening? Just put her in the closet until later. I was in the upstairs bathroom at a party when I overheard two guys in the adjacent bedroom talking about a passed-out 18-year-old girl. They were laughing, joking about playing rock, paper, scissors to decide who'd get first. They were on the second floor, far from the crowd, and they'd clearly been drinking. I was scared to confront them directly, but once they left the room, I went in, and sure enough, they had actually stuffed her in a closet. I ran downstairs and got my brothers and some of their friends, and we got her out of the house safely. Next story. When I worked as a nurse in the locked inpatient psych unit, we had a guy come in who had been banned from other hospitals for being violent. Because it was night shift, I handled most of his intake alone. I knew his history, but he was polite and helpful. He didn't complain about having his things searched or being in the locked hall. I had him sit to answer questions and take his vitals. The portable blood pressure machine was acting up, and as I was kneeling next to it, I heard him whisper, "No, it's fine. We don't need to hurt her. She's nice and just doing her job." He wasn't talking to me, and I pretended not to hear. I finished up and got out of there. I'll never forget what he said or the way he was smiling. Next story. I worked as a clerk at front desk emergency room, so I would take your basic details after you had seen the triage nurse. Guy sees the triage nurse, comes to me, then sits in the waiting room chair directly opposite me and begins to talk to himself about how he's going to follow me to my car after my shift, hit me over the head, stuff me in his car, drive me out into the desert, and then he sat there very vividly describing how he was going to essay and murder me. I finished my shift later, looked up, and this massive security guard was standing by my desk. He walked me to my car for about 2 months. Next story. It's just because they want me to conform. An alcoholic mom to her 5-year-old daughter over the phone. This was in response to the situation she was in. Her daughter had been removed from their home, she was due in court, and had to start going to treatment for her alcoholism. She definitely did not know I was in the same room supervising the phone call. Like, yes, we all want you to conform to not drunkenly driving around with your kid in the car, you brave little idiot. Look, if you want to drink, that's your own business, but when it gets to the point where it's endangering other people, especially children, even more especially your own child, there needs to be some intervention, and yeah, I hope she got the help she needed. Next story. Need a minor. Who's under 17 still? My friend's older sister, thinking out loud when she didn't realize I was in the hallway. She needed to find a minor to steal some stuff so that she and her BF could sell it for drug money. My friend had just entered the 6-month window of her 18th birthday, so it wasn't a guarantee of lenient sentencing. She settled on her youngest sister, who was 13 at the time. My friend later confessed that her sister had been forcing her to steal things several times, beginning at the age of 14. She started refusing when she got really high test scores and a scholarship. Next story. I had lent my car to a coworker, and on the day I was to get my car and keys back, she had me meet her at a pub. She was already drunk when I arrived and didn't realize it was me she was talking to and said, "I can't give her car back. I need it because the judge won't let me have my car without a breathalyzer machine installed." Turns out she had amassed enough DUIs to have her driving privileges revoked, and she was borrowing any car she could for as long as she could to keep driving home drunk from the pub every night. She also offered to buy my car and asked if the registration could be left in my name for a while. No. Wow, yeah, even if you weren't a raging alcoholic, when you sell your car to someone else, you're not just gonna leave registration in your name. You don't want that liability risk. Come on now. Next story. While waiting on my daughter to be done with guard practice years ago, the couple in the car next to me started fighting. I heard the wife say, "That's why everyone thinks you're an a-hole, Brad," which I thought was funny because actually everyone thought Brad was a nice guy who happens to be married to a huge female dog. Next story. Well, my mom said it to me, but no one else was listening. My first cousin died in a car accident and my aunt was driving the car. Everyone was very concerned about my aunt. Her husband and my dad were brothers. My mother said, wistfully, "I wish I were your Aunt Dee." I was confused because my aunt had just lost her eldest son. I asked my mom, "You wish my brother had died?" My mother laughed at me like it was the silliest thing she ever heard. "Oh, I don't want anyone to die. I just want the attention. Don't be so melodramatic." I was shocked that my aunt had gone through the most traumatic event in her life, and my mother was jealous of the attention she got. Creepy AF. Next story. This is about 30 years ago. I was a temp at a health insurance company. I processed claims. I had a lengthy commute, so I arranged to come in an hour later and stay an hour later to avoid rush hour. Anyway, I'm in my cubicle working. The office is practically empty. There was this awful man, Wendell, who was horrible. He had no work ethic and no idea of what appropriate behavior was. I had witnessed and overheard Wendell sexually harass my coworker, Bobby, on multiple occasions. Well, Wendell was a couple of cubicle rows away, and I overheard him on the company phone talking to someone who apparently owed him money. He made several graphic, physical threats to this person's safety. I don't know if any of it was about drugs, gambling, loan sharking, or what. Wendell had no idea I was there. The first thing the next morning, I went to my boss and told him everything. I also mentioned that I'd heard and witnessed him sexually harass Bobby, but she was rejecting his advances. I told my boss I was afraid for Bobby's safety because Wendell clearly had no problem using violence to get what he wanted. My boss was horrified and Wendell was gone ASAP. Next story. I was standing in line at an ice cream stand with my then boyfriend and his dad. There was a woman in front of us who had buds in and wasn't paying attention. My ex-boyfriend's dad, being the absolute lady charmer he is, looked at me, scoffed, and said, "How funny would it be if I just beat the crap out of her and essayed her?" Whilst gesturing to the lady in front of us, the one with the earbuds in. The lady running the booth heard, and I heard. Nobody else. She looked effing terrified, and for good reason. I was trying not to freak out. I knew she was a bad person, but I didn't know the extent of it until that moment. F that guy. Next story. My mother telling me I killed my brother and my husband. My brother was serving overseas when he passed, and my husband died in his sleep next to me. I don't think anyone in my life would believe me if I told them. I think I'm the only one she's ever shown her ugly side to. Next story. My abusive ex-husband. He was dying of self-inflicted and unself-regulated liver failure. He was a mean and angry and bitter dying drunk. One night, when he thought I was asleep, he leaned in really close to my ear and whispered, "This should be you." After years of trying to help and mitigate and take care of his issues. This was how I know the feeling of blood running cold. He had already tried to kill me, twice by that point. What we say about strangulation? It's very true. He meant it. Next story. My former neighbor, who was an old witch, had a Staffordshire Terrier. It was vicious and aggressive. One day, I was resting at home in my bedroom, with the windows open, and I heard her open her sliding glass door and let her dog out. I heard her say to him, "Go get her. Go on. Go get her." I wondered what was going on, so I looked out the window. She had set her dog off after a cat that had gone into her back garden. Told you she was a witch. Next story. "She's no longer useful to me," said my dad while he was on the phone with my sister. This was after I filed for FMLA from my company and spent 12 weeks, without pay, living with my parents who are in another state to help them navigate the healthcare system, make decisions about his surgery and treatment, and research and schedule and drive to and attend appointments with oncologists and surgeons following my father's melanoma stage 3C diagnosis. Yes, I understand that you're dealing with a life-threatening diagnosis and a concerning future prognosis, but I gave up 3 months of my life with my husband and daughter and took 3 months out of my career to help you. And now that my name has run out, I'm no longer useful to you? Next story. It was something I said. I was living with a roommate and he was waiting to take me to the airport as I'm in hectic last minute of packing to leave. I was really stressed out, and at the time, I had this kind of mantra I would say. It would help me calm down a bit. So I'm dashing around the apartment, grabbing last-minute things, and making sure things are set up for him to take care of my cats while I'm gone, and I'm repeating over and over, "I'm not going to kill anyone. I'm not going to kill anyone." Well, I thought he was waiting in his room, but I suddenly see that he's sitting on the door by the wall petting my cat. We had no furniture in our living room. I had no idea he was there and could hear me, and I felt really awkward and embarrassed. I continued going, and he didn't indicate he'd heard anything, but I'm sure he did, and is just thinking, what the F? Yeah, you might want to come up with a different mantra. I'm all for things that will calm your nerves in times of stress, but mentioning potentially killing somebody, maybe not the best route to go. Next story. Not something said, but witnessed, and maybe tame compared to others. We have a few outside cats that were ferals we took in. They get fed in a shed in the evening. A friend that stayed with us went to feed the cats one dark evening. One of them was not wanting to go into the shed, and friend became frustrated and spit on my cat. Friend didn't know my partner was outside and had just walked up on this happening. My partner was so angry. She didn't really address in the moment. That completely altered the way we viewed this person. Next story. My mom said, "I don't want to be called grandma," and her actions were even more scorching. She handed back a photo of my children when they were young that I had framed for her. It was a picture of my children under the tree with our dog and cats. You would have had to pry that out of my hands if I were a grandma. She did this by my sister and aunt, and I was shocked. She wasn't very angry with me, as far as I know. She's just cold. When I was about 6 years old, I heard my grandmother speaking to one of her friends on the phone. She was crying, and she said, "I feel so bad for her." Me. Her mother hasn't called to talk to her or even ask how she's doing. I could go on and on. Next story. I was cornered by an outwardly charming man in the basement of a warehouse at 3 a.m. We were completely alone in that section. A huge, rambling old place, and no one used the basement. And he said, while positioned in front of me and the exit, "Check your phone. No signal, right?" I checked my phone. To my dismay and increasing panic, there was no signal. He was smirking now. "Now try your radio." "Nothing, huh?" Dead nothing. I pushed past him, hauling ass for the door, and he grabbed my wrist real tight. I yanked away from him and crashed up the waterlogged, sagging steps, gasping something about needing to get back to work because a truck was coming. Nobody in real life knows about this, but at least it seems people know exactly what he is. Next story. Not quite no one listening, but they clearly didn't think I was listening. I, 27-year-old male, had only kind of recently realized I was bisexual and never done anything about it besides have a crush on a coworker. I still mostly have never done anything about it. I've only dated women. I'm also a SA survivor. I was SA'd by a girl when I was 18, and it took years to grapple with the fact that's actually what it was. I have panic attacks sometimes when sexy times are happening. Both of these facts are relevant to the story, I promise. I was at a Halloween party a friend threw with a bunch of college folks. I knew about 6 people total, and there was over 25 in attendance. I got really hammered, really fast. I had like 1.5 drinks of punch, but I felt like I drank half a bottle of vodka. Because of how quickly I got drunk and what happened later, I'm fairly sure I was drugged in some way. I ended up downstairs, away from anyone else except this one guy who was a lot less drunk than me. I started making out with this guy. He was a Marine and dressed in his silly chicken costume, like a full-on mascot costume. First boy I ever kissed. He got handsy and started to undo my pants, and I backed out. It was too much for me so fast. He tried to talk me into going out to his car. He said he would suck my chicken. I was starting to get super uncomfortable. A panic attack was beginning, and to top it off, I was barely able to stand. So I went upstairs and laid down on a couch. He hung on me the whole way, trying to convince me to let him F me. Anyways, eventually he stopped hanging on me, and I told my friend, the host of the party, that he was being a bit much, but I needed to crash. I drifted into and out of sleep, the kind of partial sleep that only comes when I'm super effed up and consciousness is clinging to the edge of the cliff for dear life. As I'm mostly unconscious, I hear the man and my friend arguing, like raised voices. I open my eyes a little to see them standing next to me, basically standing over me, as the man is trying to lift my dead weight up to walk me out of the house. He's saying I agreed to a ride, that he was my ride home, and he was just taking care of me. He said we go way back and that she could trust him to make sure I got home safe. She knew that was bullcrap and was yelling at him to get the F out of her house. I don't recall how that argument ended, but I remembered a bit later that I was sitting next to her and she was crying and apologizing to me. So yeah, I narrowly avoided being essayed by a stranger at a party because I was too drunk to defend myself and overheard the essayer's plan. Next story. My wife, Quebecoise, and I were working in a hospitality town and met another couple from Quebec working there and eventually became friends with them. They were fairly normal, and the 4 of us got on well enough that we became friends and started hanging outside of work. As I didn't speak much French at the time, we mostly spoke English together. One night we went out to dinner with them and got into the wine. At one point, the boyfriend, who was definitely drunk, forgot that my wife was also a native French speaker. leaned over to his girlfriend and loudly whispered in French in her ear that he wanted to F her in the ass and have my wife clean him off afterwards. His girlfriend immediately was aware that my wife was a French speaker, and we got to watch the horror slowly spread over her face as she died inside. Both she and my wife left pissed, while I had to make small talk with the guy until the bill arrived, as I was at this point still unaware of what had been said. The next day, they quit their job and I heard they moved back home. Next story. Worked at a parts store for a couple years. The worst thing I've ever heard from a customer was when I was checking to see if their battery was dead or being overcharged. It was a husband and wife, and the husband was standing at the driver's door where his wife was seated. She had the window down and they were talking. I was under the hood checking the battery, and I heard the husband say, "It should blow any minute. Hopefully it'll do it while he's near it." I pretended I didn't hear it and told them I had to run back to grab a wrench to tighten their battery cable end. Not even 5 minutes of me going inside, the battery blew up. Sounded like a effing cannon, and battery acid went everywhere. On the bright side, and karma coming to them, the acid got all over the husband, and he had to be taken to the hospital for burns. Next story. On a gross but lighter note, well, your career as a hand model is over, muttered by the nice doctor who was stitching me up after an accident in which my hand got caught between my bike and a gravel road. I had been instructed to lie down and face the other way because it was not pretty. My girlfriend was on that side trying to keep me distracted, and we were in a busy-ish ER, so I don't think he thought I'd hear. I burst out cry-laughing, which I'm sure made him feel great. My career as a hand model ended before it started, but my hand is fully functional and pretty normal looking, all things considered. Thanks to him, I also learned that you can just Frankenstein sew fingernails back on to protect the nail bed, and that hand and finger injuries can be extra hilarious because sometimes you get so much gauze wrapped around like a big novelty baseball mitt and have to keep it elevated above your heart for the first few days so everyone can see. Next story. Paramedics should replace their Naxalon with morphine and just finish off drug addicts when they OD. We should taint methadone to kill off addicts in rehab. If I ever found out my kids did drugs, I'd be having a very, very late-term abortion. My neighbor's delightful son-in-law who loves to loudly declare his views. Oh, also, if AIDS worked faster, think of how good the world would be right now. Next story. Back in my hometown on leave, friend went to the local college, invites us to a frat party. Went to the bathroom to piss. In one of the stalls, someone puking while 3 guys were arguing about getting her pants down while hearing a struggle. I kicked the one closest to me, who slammed into the stalls. The other 2 scrambled to their feet, but were so drunk they were having trouble. They kept begging me not to tell anyone. They were just teasing her. I picked her up and took her to my parents because she couldn't tell me where she lived. Next morning, she woke up in my childhood bedroom alone and confused. She remembered bits and pieces, but not going into my house. Next story. Worked in an industrial plant making heavy equipment, forklifts, man lifts, things like that. I got another job and was writing out the final day of my 2 weeks' notice. Each morning, we'd have a planning meeting and get our assignments. Everyone was just chatting before the manager got there, and there were 2 black workers beside me. One was complaining how he had to stay late the day before because the manager said he needed to fully complete his work. After a bit of bickering, the other man says, "Just tell someone up front that he called you the N-word. I'll back you up on it." I couldn't believe that these guys would wreck a man's reputation just because he made one of them work. I don't know if they ever went through with it. I hope not. Next story. I was the first person, I'm just a civilian, checking up on a young woman trapped in her car after a huge car crash. All kinds of fluid leaking from the car. She whispered, "Please don't leave me. I can't get out and I can smell the gas." I couldn't really reach her. She was trapped under the barrier on her side of the road and couldn't free her leg. I told her to try and relax so that she would do no further damage to her leg. She asked me to promise her that I wouldn't do anything to pull her out, no matter what, if the car would catch fire. I did promise her that. Luckily, help got there quickly and nothing further happened. 38 years later, I still wonder if I would have had the courage to dive headfirst into a burning car to pull her out. Yeah, that's one of those things where, like, until you're in the moment and you're faced with that situation, you really don't know how you're going to react. It's easy to say what you would do, but you really don't know when you're put under that kind of stress. Next story. I was 18, working at CVS, not the pharmacy, as a cashier on an overnight shift. A very attractive young lady, maybe around 25, comes into the store and, without even glancing at our direction, continues walking down an aisle as I lose vision of her. I was about to go back on my phone and continue a game I was playing when I hear a guy whisper to himself, I'd love to essay that female dog. And I immediately glanced up and look at the direction it came from. I see my male coworker standing there looking in the direction of the woman walked past. He then looks to his side and sees me and just walks away. I was effing stunned, terrified, and I didn't know what the F I was supposed to do. Life up until that point had not prepared me for this situation. Next story. My dad was gnarly, and I'm glad he's dead now. When I was about 15, I was up late reading when I heard him drunkenly stumble down the hallway. I hid the book and pretended to be asleep when he opened my door. I heard him say, "I'm not attracted to my teenage daughter," as he watched me sleep. To his credit, that was the only thing of that nature that ever happened. And it was only words. Even so, to this day, it makes my skin crawl. I felt so vulnerable. I never told my family because he did so much other heinous crap out in the open, and nobody helped me, so why would this be different? Next story. My mom passed away at 31. Bad heart. My dad was overwhelmed with grief from losing her and the responsibility of now trying to raise 3 kids on his own. I was the oldest at age 10. We spent a night at my grandparents' house a short time after Mom's death. For some reason, I couldn't sleep well that night, and I got up out of bed. I got as far as to where I could hear my dad talking to my grandmother without them seeing me, and overheard my dad talking about thinking of giving up custody of us kids to my mom's oldest sister. My aunt practically was the one who raised my mom and thought of her as her baby. Mom was the baby of 5 kids. So, as such, she was exceptionally fond of us 3 kids as well. For me, though, hearing Dad say that was crushing. I just lost my mom, and it sounded like I was about to lose my dad as well, and that he didn't even want us. I even went back to bed scared and nearly in tears. Luckily, Grandma talked him out of it and instead had us all move in, including Dad, with her and Grandpa. I've never ever mentioned to my dad or grandparents what I overheard that night. Next story. My sister is my mother's golden child, and we've been estranged for many years. Several years ago, my sperm donor was complaining to me about her and how she's always threatening to unalive herself. My sister is bipolar. He then said, as if he'd forgotten I was even still there, "Why doesn't she just do it already?" As much as I don't get along with my sister, that comment stunned me. He's always been a garbage excuse for a human being, and I haven't spoken to him since 2016. Next story. So I worked at an ABA therapy clinic for a while. It was a great experience overall. The company just sucked, and no, we don't abuse kids. But anyway, the one thing that did really bug me was that insurance companies and money-hungry franchised ABA clinics don't like when the kids nap. I don't know why, that's way above me, but they don't. So that meant we often would try to keep the kids awake as much as we could for the 8 hours they were there. I hated it, and it was a huge reason I left, but that's not the point. One of my supervisors was in direct session with one of our patients. We worked with 2 to 7-year-olds, and this patient was 12. The patient was getting sleepy because obviously they're 2 and they're working with us all day. The supervisor said, "Okay, let's take you to a new place to play because I can't bill if you're sleeping." I hated that supervisor. Edit. I wanted to make clear that I was not the person who kept the patient awake. It was a supervisor. I don't agree with keeping children, especially a 2-year-old, awake. The other thing I feel I should make apparent is that the parents of the patients consented to naps or no naps. It was purely the caregiver's decision on if the patient could nap or not. Usually, the younger patients would get an hour, sometimes more, and eventually, when the parent felt ready, the BCBA and caregiver would work on a titration schedule. This specific 2-year-old patient was not on my caseload. I merely overheard the supervisor make this comment. I did try to bring it up, but I was a registered behavioral technician, no longer, and she was basically one of my bosses. I want to mention also that I made no care plans whatsoever. My specific caseload did not involve patients who napped, and I reiterate that this specific comment made by one of my supervisors was one of the biggest reasons I left. I also 100% acknowledge ABA therapy had a very incredibly abusive past, and if the therapy is not implemented correctly, it absolutely is still abuse. The clinic I worked at was a trauma-informed, no restraints, play-based therapy clinic. We taught our patients a variety of things, but never did my clinic teach suppression of stims or bad behaviors. We focused mostly on redirection to a more functional way of engaging in a behavior. For example, if a patient engaged in self-injuring behavior, then we would try to redirect them to using a foam pad, rather than banging their head on the wall. A lot of our patients were trying to receive help for dangerous elopement and tolerance, schedule changes, playing with peers, and being in a classroom setting. When I was trained for this job, they actually spent a lot of time teaching us how ABA was abusive in the past, and what work and policies went into place to make it not so abusive. I understand and acknowledge that a lot of people have been hurt by ABA, and I'll never condone that type of practice. I left because the management side of my clinic was terribly rude to me personally and barely gave us time to write notes. That comment from my supervisor was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and I quit. I know I'm just some internet stranger, and I cannot speak for every ABA clinic. The clinic I worked at specifically did not abuse kids, but that supervisor always treated her technicians poorly, and it always left a bad taste in my mouth. I apologize if this was long and if I worded things poorly. I hope this explains some things better. Next story. I used to babysit my neighbor throughout high school 4 days a week, every week. We got close. She was like a little sister, and I knew her parents well. One day, while we were studying at the desk, the mom and grandma were sitting on the couch behind us talking. Then they started using horrible racial slurs. Kids adopted from South America with 110% native genetics. She's essentially black with white parents. She stopped writing mid-sentence, and then I froze. I loved this kid, and I was in awe. Whispered to her, "Did you hear that?" And she said, "Yeah." Whispered, "None of what they're saying is true. You know that, right?" And she said, "Yeah." When I left, I asked to speak with the mom privately. Chewed her out and said I wouldn't stay and watch her break her daughter's heart. That if I hear that again, I'm gone. I couldn't stop her being that way. But if I could stop it for a few hours a day, I was there. She apologized and promised to stop. She did, at least when I was around. Poor kid. Next story. Need to use a throwaway for this one. Not one person, but 3 COs at jail. I work in a larger city in the US, aiding women that are victims of sex trafficking. It's a huge problem here. They often get picked up for prostitution. Unfortunately, we don't have many resources, but we do have a lot of people in power that exasperate the issue. Anyways, my clients often spent time in jail, and I have special access to them beyond the typical visitation setup. One day, I was waiting in the hall to be escorted to my client when 3 COs were around the corner, unaware of my presence. They were laughing and talking about which women they just essayed, which ones are the best, and how they intimidate by essaying new detainees brought in by LEOs, aiding the LEOs to do the same by showing them the pods with broken cameras and more. I immediately reported it to my supervisor, who escalated it to the jail's higher-ups. The next time I was there, one of the big shots pulled me aside and asked if they really needed to remind me to, quote, "keep your effing mouth shut." Things soon got worse. Next story. When I was a student taking the bus to high school every day, a crazy/goofy guy would be there very often and say crazy but funny crap. He seemed very nice and fun, just a bit odd. I was very doubtful about this guy because he was often talking to young girls, 12 to 14 years old, while being himself around 30 years old. One day, I leaned behind him without him noticing. He was talking loud, funny crap to a 12-year-old girl, and all of a sudden, he lowered his voice and said with a smile, "I know you'd go through that street while going to school in the morning. Tomorrow I'll come and run you over with my car, and nobody will stop me. If you say something, I'll kill you tonight." The girl turned white. Me too, to be honest. He said it with a very calm voice and big smile, so everyone around thought he was still saying funny things. I called him out to everyone. The girl did too, and he got kicked out of the bus. Every time we saw him with friends, we would alert anyone on the bus. One time, the cops came, but dismissed it quickly. He's just a crazy guy. We know him. Crazy or not crazy, those are things that you just don't joke about, and more importantly, those aren't comments that you just brush off and not take seriously, so I think that they were absolutely right to report him there. Next story. The second time I visited my now wife's family, who lives on the other side of the country, I overheard her father screaming at someone over the phone. I didn't hear the entire conversation, but it was clear he was screaming at a woman who owed money to his brother. I listened to my future father-in-law threaten to come over with his brother and essay her if she didn't pay him back. I told my now wife, and we confronted him together. He didn't even deny it. He said his threats were perfectly justified. We don't see him much anymore. We unfortunately can't cut him out completely because he controls access to severely disabled mother-in-law, and my wife isn't willing to sacrifice that relationship. Next story. When I was in high school, I was on a first and last date with a guy from my neighborhood. He was driving me home and it was getting dark. There was a guy walking down the road in the middle of our lane, and my date commented that he was an idiot for walking in the middle of the road. The guy was black and we were both white. My date said, "Stupid N-word." Then, under his breath, he muttered, "He'd make good target practice." I didn't know the guy well and hadn't spent a lot of time with him, but he had always seemed nice and we played together as kids. I never heard him use that word or say anything so disturbing before. Next story. God, she's so stupid. My then boyfriend, while in a recording studio in college, he was in the studio recording me singing a track. I was confused about something technical, and he hadn't realized he left the two-way mic on, so I could hear him talking to someone else in the booth about me. Not really disturbing, but it stayed with me for so many years. It was a horrible light bulb moment that I really couldn't ever fully trust someone, no matter how much I thought they loved me. It's affected so many of my relationships as an adult. I hate to hear that, OP, but you are incredible, and I think long-term it's probably better that you heard it when you did than to find out, some other way that he didn't truly care about you. But just learn to love yourself. People are jerks that like to backtalk behind people's backs when there's no accountability, so you're going to be fine. Just keep going. Next story. On a different level, worked as an assistant at a salon. Mostly a conservative/Republican clientele, though the owner was a nice elder lady. I heard a few remarks and comments awful people tend to make when they think no one is listening. It's been a few years now, so I've forgotten most of them. I have to think really hard about them, but they're along the lines of what generational wealthy people think of the average person. The one that stuck with me was one lady's comment about the Kroger she had visited. In regards to the employees having one of those morning meetings, I guess they mentioned vacation time. So this lady says, I don't think they should even be allowed to take vacation time. Like, that's what these people think of us peon working class. This was like 2018 to 2021, but these people have always thought this way. It was just really disheartening. We should all be allowed to make a decent, honest living and a livable wage without just being slaves to the wage. I hear some crazy remarks at my current job as well. Next story. Just leave her on the couch for now. My mom had gone out one night when I was 12 and I had woken up to get some water. I saw my neighbor and his friend dragging her in, and when I heard him say that, I thought they had killed my mom and were trying to hide the body. I immediately screamed, but they just grabbed my hand and told me what actually happened. Basically, Mom had gotten a little too drunk and passed out in my car. My neighbor was the designated driver and brought her home. He told my dad after, and he decided to have an intervention with her. As of right now, she's coming up on 7 years sober. Next story. Sometimes I walk my dog with my headphones in, but no music, because my neighbors always talk to me and I don't want to. Anyways, I'm walking my usual route, and I feel like I'm being watched, but I'm 6'2", so don't feel that threatened. But my dog is getting creeped out by some guy behind me, keeps turning around, and I start running further ahead. Then I hear the guy almost whispering to himself say, I can kill him right now. No one would know. Just murder him. Look at him. I didn't turn around. I just walked faster, changed my route, and then went home. Next story. I threw up at work and requested to go home. When I was around the corner of an open door, people, including the boss, were gleefully assuming that I must have gotten knocked up. We were on a trip abroad and everyone knew I didn't have a partner. They thought I was going to be an unplanned single mom. That's a whole-ass human being brought into the world without a dad and unwanted by their mom, and they thought it was peak comedy. People are effed up. Spoiler alert, I was not pregnant and there was no chance I could have been. Next story. I would go out at night to smoke the devil's lettuce very quietly in the dark. My neighbor's back door suddenly opened, but the light was kept off. He let out the newly adopted puppy to go to the bathroom. He was trying to be quiet, but their dog started barking at my dog, who remained quiet. Good boy. And he said it in a hushed tone, effing rat, shut up. You want to go back to the pound? Then I couldn't make out entirely, but it sounded like he said something along the lines of, "I don't care if the daughter loves you. I'll tell her you ran away." Yikes. And told my mom, and we kept an eye on them in case he really did let her run away. He didn't, but I still can't believe he said that. Next story. Years ago, when I was visiting with my brother, I was in a foster home. He'd been adopted, separate families. That awful woman, I refused to give her the dignity of calling her his adoptive mother, said to my foster female dog, "Ditto with that. See you next Tuesday. Dealing with them is simple. You just medicate them until they're unconscious, then work backward from there." And people wonder why I have such a negative outlook on psych meds. Next story. I was at dinner with a group, and a guy's son was talking to me. When he thought nobody was listening, he mumbled that men should be allowed to beat women. We were talking about his teenage sister and how he was annoyed with her since she wouldn't let him play with her or her friends. We heard and were all like, "No, don't say that." His dad didn't seem to care much, but it was scary to see an 8-year-old say that. And he said it so deadpan, I knew it wasn't a joke. Next story. "I was going to try to kiss her," said the guy who has serious mental issues, who's had an obsession with me since we were kids. Basically, was going to try to follow me somewhere quiet and try to kiss me at an event we were both at. He does not accept rejection well. I've seen him beat 10 bells of crap out of his sisters. I'm disabled now and would have stood no chance. My friends who knew this told me casually and laughed it off. I felt like someone had dumped ice water on my head. Let's just say we don't really talk anymore. Next story. Listen to my friend on the phone call with someone while we were playing video games in the back room, and I was listening, and he was telling an investigator, I guess, how when he was in juvenile hall, he was SA'd by the staff. He went in great detail about how this person would watch him shower and make sure that he didn't wash his butt because he wanted his butt to be dirty. And he would just stare at him and like as he would go to reach down to wash his ass. He'd look up and the guy would just be looking at him, but with a mean look, shaking his head like, "Nope, leave it." Next story. My grandmother said, "I think they make more of a fuss when black kids go missing. I think it's racism against these white children who they're not on the news, you know?" A final on my college exam on my criminology classes had the question, what groups do serial killers most commonly target? It's mostly minority kids and female or trans sex workers specifically, because it won't get on the news and the police won't investigate if they go missing. So yeah, I was not pleased. Next story. I was in municipal court trying to get out of a speeding ticket, and I happened to be on the next to last row. On the last row were the ladies who had been brought in from the county jail for their court appearances. The two who were directly behind me were whispering about their situations, and one of them casually says to the other, "If this mother effer gives me more time, I got a shank up in my privates. I'm gonna stick him in his neck." My case came before hers. I did, in fact, not get out of the ticket, so I did not see how all that turned out. There was nothing in the paper later about a judge getting shanked in municipal court, so I hope things went well for everyone involved. Next story. You and I both know what I'm capable of. The words of my essayer, 6 years after he did what he did. He randomly showed up to my house to apologize to me and explaining that he, quote, didn't think it was SA because he thought I wanted it. Only to turn right around and say this after him and I went back and forth for 15 minutes about me not wanting to take his hand like he asked me to. Over and over I said, "No, I don't want to," at least 30 times, all while standing over me as I sat in a chair. I thought I was healed from my past, but him doing that showed me that my no still meant nothing and his apology always fake. I felt my heart sink to my ass as soon as he disregarded my first no. I felt small and cornered. I kept my cool, but as soon as he left, I locked the door and had the wildest panic attack of my life. I felt so stupid for thinking he could have actually been sorry, and I was actually willing to forgive him. Next story. When I was 11, my cousins, who were mostly female, ages 12 to 15, were swimming in a pool out in the boonies. These two inbred-looking rednecks show up and start talking in a really degrading manner about my cousins while sitting on the picnic table watching them swim. One of them went inside my mom's trailer to tell them what they were doing, and my mom shot out and turned 25 feet tall screaming at these men, shouting at my cousins to get in the Airstream, screaming all sorts of cuss words. We watched movies and played video games the rest of the night, but it still sticks with me. It happened in Florida, and we were heading to Key West.